Good afternoon. Hopefully you can see me. And as Tommy would say in the musical, you can see me and you can hear me. Um, Good afternoon and happy Thursday, which is otherwise known as Don't Forget to Turn Off Your Mics Day. Starting off with the Secretary General. This morning, in a video message played to Gavi's Global Vaccine Summit, the Secretary General noted that COVID-19 is the greatest public health crisis of our generation, and he called for global solidarity to ensure that every person everywhere has access to the vaccine. The Secretary General stressed the need to make three key commitments. First, he said we must find a safe way to continue delivering vaccinations, even as COVID-19 spreads. Second, we must use the networks of vaccine delivery to deliver a range of other primary health services. And lastly, a COVID-19 vaccine becomes available, we must make sure it reaches everyone. This morning, the Security Council heard a briefing on peacekeeping and was given presentations by the force commanders of the UN missions in Mali, South Sudan, and from the UN Disengagement Force. Also briefing today was the head of the Department of Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix. He reminded council members that as the world is facing the challenges of COVID-19, so is peacekeeping. He paid tribute to the peacekeepers, civilians, military, and police who have shown dedication and commitment as they continue to carry out their mandates in the best way possible, given the constraints imposed on them by the pandemic. Over the past few months, he added, peacekeeping operations have shown their capacity to adapt. The peacekeepers' response has been guided by four main objectives. First, protecting our personnel and their capacity to continue critical operations. Second, containing and mitigating the spread of the virus. And third, supporting national authorities in their responses. And fourth, protecting vulnerable communities while delivering the mandate implementation. The Security Council also adopted resolution to establish the new Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, or UNITAMS. There's never a good day at the UN where we don't get a new acronym. UNITAMS, UNITAMS. The resolution says the new mission will assist the political transition, progress towards democratic governance, in the protection and promotion of human rights and sustainable peace. The mission will also support the peace processes and implementation of future peace agreements, as well as assist in peace building, civilian protection, and the rule of law, in particular in Darfur and the two areas. The resolution also says that the mission will support the mobilization of economic and development assistance and coordination of humanitarian assistance. Also this morning, the Council extended the mandate of the African Union UN hybrid operation in Darfur, UNAMID, until the 31st of December of this year. We have another update on the support provided by peacekeeping missions to the pandemic response in the countries where we operate. In Darfur, in fact, the mission there donated medical equipment and material to the Zelenge Teaching Hospital located in central Darfur. The mission also supported the national prison authorities by disseminating information materials on virus prevention in places of detention. And through its rule of law division, the mission worked on the development of contingency plans to handle virus cases in prisons, including designating isolation areas in detention centers. And in the Central African Republic, work continues to implement the mandate of the peacekeeping mission. This week in Bangui, young recruits of the National Gendarmerie received the training on gender-based sexual violence conducted by UN police officers. And turning to a couple of other countries where we're working with the government on containing the pandemic. In Mozambique, the UN and our humanitarian partners launched today two plans to respond to increased humanitarian needs in the country. The appeal covers over $103 million to support the government-led response efforts. The aim is to provide life-saving assistance to more than 3.3 million people impacted by the humanitarian consequences of COVID-19, as well as the recurrent climate of shocks and the increasing violence in the Cabo Delgado province of Mozambique. For Cabo Delgado, the rapid response plan will prioritize the urgent needs of more than 350,000 people in the province, including 211,000 who have been displaced by the increasing violence. The wave of armed attacks in the region since October of 2017 have escalated significantly since the beginning of the year. And that is leaving tens of thousands of people without adequate access to food, water, sanitation, or any basic services. For the rest of the country, $68 million is requested to support the health response to COVID-19 and also to provide humanitarian assistance as well as protection to vulnerable groups whose lives and livelihoods have been impacted by the pandemic. And the Kingdom of Eswatini, where we have seen 295 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 201 patients having fully recovered, and 3 deaths reported so far. The UN team there, which is being led by the resident coordinator, Nathalie Ndongoshi, continues to work with the government, the people, and the partners to flatten the curve and address the impacts of the pandemic. The World Health Organization helped authorities update the COVID-19 response plan, including boosting contact tracing. Ahead of school openings on July 1st, the WHO is preparing teachers and school staff on how to prevent and control the virus. The UN is also supporting the government's communications efforts to reach out to communities and families, especially in hotspots across the country. UNICEF has helped train more than 4,000 community health volunteers and has also worked to improve health facilities accommodating COVID-19 patients with mobile showers, toilets, and hand washing facilities. For its part, the UN Children's Fund and the UN Development Program have donated dignity and basic hygiene packs, water, sanitation supplies for children, youth and women in prisons and other detention facilities. For its part, UNAIDS has donated 5,000 hygiene packs to people living with HIV to combat misinformation and share fact-based, verified information. The UN team is also working closely with senior editors and reporters in Eswatini. And from Bangladesh, the UN Refugee Agency confirms to us that a 71-year-old Rohingya man was the first refugee in Cox's Bazar to die from COVID-19. The humanitarian community is deeply saddened to learn of this development and sends its condolences to the families and the wider Rohingya community. Some 30 other people have tested positive so far, but as testing is still ramping up, it's likely that the numbers are higher, and there may have been others who have died of virus-related health issues. Aid workers are striving around the clock to ensure that testing is available to refugees and to those who have COVID-19 have adequate facilities in place to care for them. They're also working to ensure contact tracing and quarantine of those who may have been exposed. UNHCR has built isolation centers and stepped up its efforts to prevent the spread of the virus. And more than 3,000 refugees have also been trained in early warning alerts and response procedures to identify and refer potential cases. UNHCR says the joint response plan for the Rohingya crisis is only 26% funded. And our colleagues and friends at the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization today say they have joined their partners in the Global Action on Disability, GLAD, to raise awareness on the urgent need to mitigate the impact of school closures due to COVID-19 on learners with disabilities. As many as half of the estimated 65 million primary and lower school age children with disabilities in developing countries were already out of school before the pandemic started. The Secretary General said they face a lack of accessible public health information. They also face significant barriers to implementing basic hygiene measures and to access health facilities. He added that girls and women with disabilities in particular face greater risks such as domestic violence. The Food and Agriculture Organization said today that global commodity food prices fell for the fourth consecutive month in May, as supplies appear to be strong and demand weakens due to economic contractions triggered by the pandemic. The FAO food price index averaged 162 points. Let me read that again. Let me get these numbers right. The food price index averaged 162.5 points in May. That's 1.9% below the previous month. It was the lowest reading of the index since December of 2018. And today we mark the International Day of Innocent Children Victims of Aggression. We acknowledge that the pain suffered by children who are victims of physical, mental, and emotional abuse. The day also serves to reaffirm our commitment to protect children in line with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And tomorrow is World Environment Day. This year's theme is Time for Nature. In his message, the Secretary General said that to care for humanity, we must care for nature. He stresses that we need our entire global community to change course and adds that as we work to build back better, we need to commit to a green and resilient future and put nature where it belongs, at the heart of our decision making. This year's host for the day is Colombia. The theme seeks to both educate the public about the value that our natural world provides, as well as stress the urgency of protecting it. You can find a list of digital activities planned online and follow the social media with the hashtag for nature. And tomorrow, after my briefing, we will be delighted to welcome our friend Rima Baza, the spokesperson for the President of the General Assembly of these United Nations. She'll be here on this same platform to brief you. All right, I've managed to get through my bit of the briefing. I will now see if I can find some hands raised. Let's go to the chat. Okay. Oh, there we go. I was pretty bad during the video was bad. All right. James has a question or two. What a surprise. James, go ahead.
There we go. I wanted first to ask you about quite important developments in Libya, where the GNA seem to have made significant military victories in the south of Tripoli. They now are saying the siege of Tripoli is over. What is the UN's reaction to those military developments?
We continue to be concerned by the violence that we're seeing on the ground. Our focus, the mission's focus, is on the talks that have begun to reestablish the ceasefire in line with the 5+5 format talks. As you know, yesterday, our colleagues in the mission spoke to the LNA side, and they should be speaking to the GNA side in the next few days or shortly, and we hope that does move forward. So our focus remains on getting the parties to agree on a well overdue cessation of hostilities.
Okay. My next question is about Hong Kong. There's been a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the spokesperson there in Beijing, about historical, I know, but the British-China joint declaration, which is deposited at the UN, saying that was a unilateral policy announcement by China, not a promise from China to the UK, and even less so an international commitment. Just from the UN's point of view, as you hold this document, is this document, in the UN's view, an international treaty, and are the signatories bound by it?
The fact that we are depositories of this of the document, and it was registered with us, does not imply that we have a role to play within it. And that's all I'm able to say.
And in terms, though, of this is clearly an issue of international dispute, and what the UK is saying and what China is saying, what the US is involved, all sorts of major powers involved in this. They have a dispute. What is the UN's position about the status of Hong Kong and the new security law? Because I've asked you this for over a week now, and you gave me an initial holding statement. It would be useful for you to tell me what the UN's position is.
On the security law, I think I expressed our position. I expressed our position clearly, and you can go back to the transcript. And as far as the UN is concerned, we follow the general. We are guided by the General Assembly's position on one China. On one China. Okay. Any other questions? Let me see if I can't. I'm trying to see if I can see tiny little hands up. Edie. All right. Edie's raising her
Yeah, my voice.
voice. That's. I don't. No need to raise your voice, Edie. Just your hand.
Well, I did put two notes in the chat box.
Sorry, I'm still struggling with that.
Follow up on Hong Kong. Hong Kong today outlawed insulting China's national anthem. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that? And after that, I have another question.
No, I have no particular comment on this point on that, on what was passed in the Legislative Council. Go ahead.
And with some airlines resuming flights, does the Secretary General have any comment on what or how airlines should act during the COVID-19 era?
I think the International Civil Aviation Organization put out, I believe, yesterday or the day before, a document to guide airlines both in terms of how to handle passengers in flight, how to handle cargo, how to handle on the ground crews and loading. We would encourage member states to follow the recommendations laid out by ICAO in order to keep everybody safe.
Thank you.
Abdelhamid?
Thank you, Stéphane. I was wondering, the panel today, this morning, about Palestine, which was organized by the UN Committee on Palestinian Inalienable Rights. It's a UN body, the committee. Why it was not announced in the UN briefing before or today? Why there was no mention of this?
I mean, I think traditionally we flag meetings of the Security Council that involve resolutions that impact the Secretary. We don't flag every meeting of the Security Council. We don't flag every meeting of the General Assembly, and we don't flag every meeting of any legislative body that occurs. I mean, it has no implication on how we, on the seriousness of the event. It was a member state event, but we don't usually flag every member state event that takes place.
It's a UN committee event, just to.
I understand. I'm not disputing. It's an official UN committee. A lot of committees meet all the time. We don't proactively flag all of those meetings. Like we don't proactively flag every meeting of the Security Council.
As a follow-up, Mr. Dujarric, there are 24 days or 26 days left to the annexation. And every country in the world is talking about this annexation. We haven't heard from the Secretary General as of today, from him, a statement in the name of the Secretary General about this annexation. I know the general statement about his position on annexation, but this is a major development. How can he be silent when there is 30% of Palestinian occupied land will be annexed by Israel?
You and I are on these parallel roads. I don't believe he's been silent. Whether it's a statement, whether it's something that I read out or Mr. Mladenov reads out in the Secretary General's name, I don't think Nikolai Mladenov could have been clearer in a public meeting of the Security Council in underscoring the Secretary General's grave concern and the grave impact it could have if annexation goes through. All right. If anyone has a question, just open your mic because I'm just not seeing this.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I put a couple of question signs in the chat, but I don't think you're getting them. I've got two questions. Can I do one and then one?
Yes, go ahead.
The first one is continuing with James's question about Libya. Sometimes when it comes to peace talks and negotiations, folks go to the meeting and we know that nothing's going to happen. So what we sometimes look for is decisive changes in the military situation. And after those, you often see that the motivation for engaging in peace talks changes amongst the parties. So given what's happened in Libya with the retaking of the capital, Tripoli, does the UN see this as a moment of opportunity for peace talks that should be seized upon?
Look, I think the questions you raised are a very interesting one, and I think those for analysts and journalists like you to answer. I cannot speak to the motivation of the parties. I mean, we all know what's going on the ground. We all see what's going on the ground. We're not blind to it. We have been pushing for these talks to resume. We have been pushing for a cessation of hostilities, for a ceasefire, since this new wave of violence began more than a year ago. What motivates the parties is a question you need to ask them. But we are seizing the opportunity, whatever the motivations may be.
That's great, Stéphane. Thank you. I've got a second question, which is on a different topic. It's in Saudi Arabia. It's a bit of a slow burn issue. I'm not sure if you've commented on it before, but it's about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and part of his redevelopment agenda for Saudi Arabia is the construction of this super high-tech city in the northwest of the country. The city is called Neom. It becomes a human rights issue because there's this tribe called the Huwaitat tribe. They're kind of like Bedouins in the area. They say they're being kicked off the land. And there's been one incident of a campaigner in the group experiencing what some people have seen as an extrajudicial execution. Can you guys comment on what's happening in this Tabuk region of Saudi?
Let me look. Let me look at the report, James, and we'll come back to you.
Thanks so much.
But that doesn't, because I personally have not heard, doesn't take away from the seriousness of the issue, but I will take a look.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see if I can make this chat work. Otherwise, if you have a question,
yeah, I have a question.
yes, Gloria, and then we'll go to Alan.
I'm very concerned about the refugee areas, and I'm pleased to know that attention's being paid. Can we give them more education on nursing and caring for each other and medical? Is there a way for us to use the refugees, some of them very high level, who are sitting there practically rotting, doing nothing all day, glad to be able to eat or sleep? Some of them are brains. They're what made America and what made Europe, as a matter of fact. Those guys, we train.
Gloria, those are very interesting points, and it's exactly the message from the Secretary General in his report he put out yesterday on people on the move, which is one of the key messages, is that communities that host refugees should be using the wealth of know-how and whether it's technical or intellectual that are in these refugee communities.
I'm thrilled to hear that, frankly. It's so key.
Okay. Alan has a question. He can't log on, but he says, was there a Middle East Quartet meeting scheduled for today? Do you have an update on behalf of the UN? No, I have no update to share with you on the Middle East Quartet at this point. Okay. Any other questions? Open your mics. Otherwise, we'll try to have a better go at it tomorrow. Hasta mañana.